It is good to be here today. We are Kirk and Sandi Brown, U.S. missionary chaplains to the foster world. And we are based out of the Madison area. And our ministry is called Bridges of Hope because we're trying to bridge the gap between the church and the foster world.
And our story with being involved in foster care started when we got married just over almost 26 years ago. And we had been trying to have kids for over 9.5 years after we first got married. And we just really wanted to be parents more than anything. And just were not able to have kids of our own. And it was really hard, especially for me. We had all the well-meaning friends and family, our moms, when are you going to make me grandparents? And, all the people asking us questions over and over again. And it's something we just wanted so badly, but just God wasn't blessing us with a child. And it was even harder for me because I worked at a high school at that time in the guidance office. And I often saw young ladies come in wanting to speak with the counselor because they had found themselves pregnant and they did not want to be pregnant. And I had a hard time rationalizing that in my mind as to, God, why would you allow them to have a child? And they don't even want one. And here we are wanting to be parents, and you're not blessing us. And there was many times I just found myself on the bathroom floor just crying my eyes out, just saying, God, why don't you hear us? Why don't you see us? Why aren't you answering our prayer? And it's one particular day, it was just too much to bear. And I finally, just crying my eyes out to God, I finally decided to just give it over to God, what I should have done in the first place, right? That's right. And I prayed a prayer that sounded something like this. I said, God, if you never allow me to be a mother, I'm still going to worship you. And God, if you never give us children, I'm still going to serve you. And it was at that moment that I prayed that I felt that burden lifted because I had finally put that in God's hands. And, wiped the tears. And as I got up off the floor that day, I added a "but God" to the end. And I said, but God, I'm almost 30 years old. And I've always pictured being a mother by the time I turn 30. So God, would you at least let me feel like I'm a mother by the time I turn 30? And, wiped my tears, got up from that day. And it was a couple months later that we felt ourselves prompted by God with this question over and over again. And the question was, what are you going to do with the extra bedrooms in your house? Over and over again, what are you going to do with the extra bedrooms in your house? And we were thinking, okay, God, we are trying to become parents. And just over and over again, we just felt that question, what are you going to do with the extra bedrooms in your house?
And we looked into adoption, but it was way too expensive for us. And about that time, someone mentioned, well, why don't you become a licensed foster parent and you could adopt through the foster agencies, and they would help pay for a lot of those costs. And so Sandi and I, we prayed about it. We felt like that's what God wanted us to do. So we started to take classes to become licensed foster parents. The very first class that we took, the teacher got up and said, there's a sibling group of 3 that's come up for adoption. The parental rights have been terminated. Is there anyone here interested in adopting these 3 kids? And me and Sandi looked at each other, and we both raised our hands. And we have a picture of these 3 kids right here. And they came into our house, our hearts, and our home at the age of 6, 9, and 10. Their names were Kiri, Jenna, and Trey. And about 9 months later, we were able to adopt this sibling group of 3. And God made us a family. Amen. Well, because of how God made us a family, we have a good understanding how to minister to those in the foster world.
And I will note that picture was taken the very first weekend that they were with us, just kind of a trial weekend to see how things went. And, after they left after that weekend, I realized it was 2 days before my 30th birthday. So God had allowed me to feel like a mother for a weekend and answered my prayer, but he didn't stop there. He allowed me to become a mother to these kids. And, we look back now, and that whole time we were praying to become parents, our kids were alive. God knew about that. He had this intricate plan and he knew that they would need us at a specific moment. So it's just kind of neat seeing that now.
And our plan is to do 2 things. Number 1, we want to minister to the young people that are aging out of the foster system. Now, can we just pretend 2 things today? Number 1, can we just all pretend that we are in the foster system today? And number 2, can we pretend that it's our 18th birthday today? Now, some of you are going to have to go way back, right? But just try to remember when you turned 18. And so we wake up and we think, maybe our foster parents, maybe they made us a birthday cake. Maybe they bought us a birthday present. Maybe they're going to throw me a birthday party. I've never had a birthday party before. And so we get out of our bed with excitement and we leave our bedroom with anticipation, only to have our foster parents hand us one of these. Garbage bag. They tell us to pack up your stuff, kid. It's time for you to get out of the house. We need your room for a foster kid that we can make some money off of. That's the reality for about 23,000 young people in our country every year. Now, I don't know about you, but when I turned 18, I wasn't ready for the real world on my own. Imagine turning 18 and having no parents, no family to help guide you into adulthood.
And the statistics regarding these youth that age out are just horrible. 50% of them will end up homeless. 60% will end up in the sex industry. And 60% of boys who age out will end up convicted of a crime. They just don't have the proper support system to help them out. And we really believe the church is the answer for this. One of our tasks as missionaries is to start a mentorship program that will basically pair people in the church with these youth, people who can just come alongside them, teach them the basic life skills that they need to know, provide that support system that they need, and answer basic questions that they might have. Now, you saw a picture earlier of our kids when we first got them. I think one of the next slides should be a picture of them right now. They're all married. We have one grandbaby on the way, another in process of being adopted. So our family is growing. But these group of kids, man, they've asked us so many questions since they left the house. Just simple things like, how do you read an apartment lease? How do you cook chicken? And do you get an apartment with your friend who was just evicted for not paying her rent? What do you do when you lose your Social Security card? Or a funny question the bride asked just a few months back, I just ate eggs that expired 2 days ago. Am I going to die? And we know that not everyone can foster and adopt. In fact, most people are not able to, but we really believe that everyone should be able to be a mentor to one of these youth who've aged out, just someone to be a support system. And think about the eternal impact of pairing people in the church with these youth. We have the possibility to change the course of their lives. This exact thing happened with a young lady we met named Cheryl. Now, Cheryl had grown up in several different foster homes, and some of which were pretty abusive homes. One, in fact, that she had to sleep with a hammer under her pillow because her foster dad kept threatening to come in the middle of the night to abuse her. And after years of going home to home and having all this trauma and these different situations, you would have hoped when she turned 18 her life would have been better. But she was one of these youth who found herself sitting on the curb outside of her foster home when she turned 18. All of her stuff in bags, just sitting there wondering, where am I going to go? What am I going to do? She sat there for hours, and the neat thing about her story is she doesn't end in a bad statistic because she had an older sister who ended up reaching out to her and sending her a bus ticket saying, Cheryl, come live with me. I'll take you in for a while. This older sister, the really neat thing is that she's a born-again Christian and took Cheryl to church with her. Cheryl went to church, accepted Jesus in her heart, and today Cheryl is an Assemblies of God U.S. missionary. So just that little thing of her sister taking her in really changed the course of her life.
Besides ministering to those that are aging on the foster system, we also want to help local churches like yours to either start or enhance their foster ministries. And that means ministering to foster parents, foster workers, biological parents whose kids are now in the foster system, and kids that are in the foster system as well. And Sandy and I, we've been able to talk to a number of different foster workers around Wisconsin now. And we've asked them and their agencies, do you need the church's help? Do you want the church's help? And every one of them have said yes. And they said yes because right now in our state, there's over 7,600 foster kids. They said yes because right now in our country, there's over 100,000 kids ready to be adopted right now. They're just waiting for someone to open up their hearts and their home to them. They've said yes to us because right now, on any given day in our country, there's over 400,000 foster kids. But there's also about 380,000 churches in our country, which means that if every church had at least one family that would look after and take care of one of those in the foster system, it would obliterate the foster crisis going on in our country. The church really is the answer and the reinforcements that our country needs. And we need some Christ-like foster parents out there. You know, the truth is, fostering is very hard. Statistics show that half of foster parents quit fostering after the first year because of how hard it is. And half of them quit the second year. But statistics also show that when a foster family has a church that wraps around them, helps them, and encourages them, that number drops to only 10% quit fostering. So 90% of foster parents continue to foster. Some of them even adopt when they have a church's help and support. You can really do something to change the life of those in the foster world.
And a good example of that is a caseworker we spoke with named Lance, and he was telling us about the first time that he placed children into a foster home. He said he was nervous, first time on the job, but he was also nervous because it was their first time ever receiving a foster placement. And they had asked for one child at a time, but he said he had called them and said, "I have 2 boys. Would you be interested in taking 2?" And they said, "Yes, bring the boys on over." And he said as they entered the house, the boys immediately start running through the house, and he could see instant stress on their eyes. Like, what did we just agree to? And he said he wondered the same thing because every bit of the living room furniture was white. So kind of wondered how that would end. But he said as he's talking to them, going through everything that a foster parent needs to know about these children, he said he could see the stress level just getting higher and higher as they were realizing everything that they were going to need to do. But he said as he's talking to them, there's a knock on their front door. It was a family from their local church, and this family had a big bag of clothes in their hand. And they just simply said, "We heard you got 2 boys instead of 1. You're going to need some extra clothes." A little while later, there's a second knock on their door. It was another family from that church, and this family had a car seat in their hand. And they said the same thing. "We heard you got 2 boys instead of 1. You're going to need another car seat." And he said that vehicle hadn't even left the driveway, and there was a third one pulling in. And this third family had a big bucket of KFC chicken in their hand. They said, "We know you're not going to have time to cook tonight. We just want to bless you." He said with everyone that came, he could see that stress level decreasing because they realized that they had a church right around them to help them, a support system. And he said years later that they told him the only reason they ever stayed foster parents was because of that church. The only reason they ever adopted was because of that church. So while most of us may not be able to be foster parents, we have a mission field in our own backyard of people who need the help and support of the church.
And you can help us do these two things in at least 3 ways. Number one, we need your prayers. And my prayer is that every time you see one of these, a garbage bag, maybe you'll think of those in the foster system, or maybe more specifically the young people that are aging out of the foster system, or maybe every time you see a garbage bag, you'll think of Sandy and I in our ministry, Bridges of Hope, and maybe you'll pray for us. We desperately need your prayers.
And the second way that you can help us is financial support. We are itinerating missionaries and can't launch a lot of this until we hit 100%. But as you can see, we're getting close. We're actually at 92% now. If you can we just challenge you to pray as a church, as individuals, about coming alongside us and helping us launch this.
And number 3, you can help us by getting involved. The fact is, everyone in the church can do something to minister to someone in the foster world, because there's thousands of ways of showing the love of Christ to those in our area. And we want to close with one last story. There was a little boy named Johnny who was in the foster system. Little Johnny went to camp one week. And while he was at camp, they were having hot dogs for lunch. And little Johnny told his counselor, "I can't wait to have a hot dog. I've never had a hot dog before. I've only had hot dog soup." His counselor said, "Hot dog soup? I've never heard of that before. What's that?" That's when little Johnny told him, "Well, when my foster parents make hot dogs, my foster parents eat the hot dogs, but they only give us foster kids the water that they made the hot dogs in." People, every time I hear that, that makes me angry, but it's a great illustration. It's why we need some Christ-like foster and adoptive parents. It's why we need people in the church to rise up and minister to those in the foster world. And thank you, Pastor, for letting us come and speak today. We'll be at our table in the coffee shop after service. God bless you.